and welcome into DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell, and this week I'm with Cody Chaffins. We had our vacation last week, so Connor gets to have his this week. Cody and I have a good friendship inside of this room and outside of it as well, and I feel like I've always been really nice to you, but after the events that occurred last week on the cruise, I am never going to say a bad thing about you because I know that you'll come after me.
So on the cruise, they had listed out SEC roast, and what they wanted us to do was kind of roast some of the other SEC coaches. And so I sat on the pool deck on Utopia of the Seas and typed up, I channeled my inner Louis Grizzard, who used to be a comedian from the University of Georgia who was great at making fun of the Clemsons and Auburns of the world. So I kind of channeled that. And so, yeah, I made the most of our SEC roast, and somebody asked, hey, why is that not posted online? I said, I don't want that posted online. Because that just asks all the other fan bases to come after me. But I think Georgia fans, Dog fans, we can have some fun at Alabama people's expense, or Tennessee, or Auburn, because there's plenty to joke about with those schools.
Or in this case, your own coworkers.
Oh, they were nice. I was fairly nice to my coworkers.
You definitely were.
It was more of using my coworkers to set up jabs at other teams.
I thought you did a good job of navigating that without hurting anybody's feelings, and coming out of the cruise, telling my family and my friends what my favorite part about it was. And I was like, it's easily the roast, and like you mentioned, it's never going to be out there to the world, so they're just never going to understand. But it was totally the highlight, and I was so proud of you.
Yeah, I got to see it. Like Brandon. I say, hey, Brandon Adams is here. He hates Florida, and then take a shot at Florida. Or Mike Griffith is here. He covered Tennessee back in the day, Tennessee's last national championship, which I think I said he called in the story on a payphone next to a Blockbuster. So just fun things like that, because it was a long, long time ago the Vols won a championship.
Well, let me just say I am honored today to share the stage with the Roast Master here on DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
So here's the thing about not only working in sports, but going on some sort of a vacation when you're in sports. 1 week away from a normal job probably doesn't seem like that much, but when you're in sports and you're gone away for 1 week, it might as well be 1 year, because we missed so many things that happened last week when we were on the ship. So we're going to get to all of these things today, starting with what did we learn about Georgia from this year's NFL draft? I feel like there's a lot of takeaways that we could make, so we'll break them all down today. Then we'll do our Dog Bite segment where we cover a variety of topics. I've got some today that revolve around Georgia football, some that are kind of away from Georgia football. And then the draft brought so many great memes, especially because this one was just a little bit spicy all around. So instead of doing one meme today, we're going to give 3 apiece. And it was so hard to narrow it down to just 3. I think I liked over 100 tweets from the draft. So we're going to do an extended meme machine today. But we'll start with making it Georgia football based. And obviously a lot of Georgia players were invited to the Combine. A lot were invited to the Senior Bowl. But I don't know if any of us expected that 13 guys would go. I was thinking maybe 11 or 12 at the most. And a lot of people looked at Georgia this year as having a down year. Kirby Smart only goes 11-3, but still puts out 13 guys in the draft. I really think this draft showed us that the standard really is the standard. Kirby Smart remains on top. Since he took over as head coach, 76 Georgia players have been selected, including 20 in the first round, 3 of those coming on Thursday. He's only lost 19 games over his 9 seasons, and Athens has had 20 first-round picks. So his ability to kind of take that talent but also give them this sort of mindset and the culture that they instill into them at Georgia just goes to show that as long as Kirby Smart is head of the program at Georgia, the draft picks are just going to fly off the board.
Yeah, they went all over the place. It was so much fun to watch those guys, especially the 3 first-rounders. We were on our DawgNation cruise when those 3 first-rounders were drafted. But you talk about that 13 number and how it rounded out. And a big reason that it rounded out the way it was, there were some guys on the fringe. You mentioned NFL Combine. Dan Jackson wasn't invited. He ends up getting drafted. A guy, Dom Lovett, I wasn't sure he was going to get drafted, but he ends up getting drafted as well. And what happened is, at the end of this draft, when you get into late rounds, there's a couple of things. First off, teams want special teams players. NFL, the rosters are limited. You got to be able to do multiple things. So I need my wide receiver to be the gunner on special teams. Well, all of these Georgia players, because of the way Kirby Smart runs his program, they all play special teams. Dan Jackson blocking punts for multiple years at Georgia. You talk about Dom Lovett, who's a gunner with Arian Smith, who also got drafted pretty high. right there, a guy who, again, in some mock drafts was not going to be drafted. So a lot of those teams want a special teams player. And then you talked about the practice that Kirby Smart puts on. And we heard from Brad Holmes, the Detroit Lions general manager, who said, I go to practices, they don't usually look like Georgia practices look. And for that reason, you know, those guys have kind of gone through that gauntlet of playing or practicing at Georgia. He knows they be professional and also take coaching. So if you're going to err late in the draft, you're going to pick up a Dom Lovett. You're going to pick up a Dan Jackson, because I'm going to err not with a small school guy. I'm going to err with a guy who's played at the University of Georgia and started at the University of Georgia, because I got a lot more wiggle room there, and at least the guy's going to help out on special teams.
Yeah, and I think all of this goes to speak to the fact that, and this is hard too, because again, we talk so much about a down year, but when you look at 13 draft picks, especially guys that were taken higher than I thought they would be, guys like Trevor Etienne, Arian Smith, even some of the offensive linemen, clearly individual talent was maybe not as big of an issue as we viewed it to be this year. I think Connor Riley said it really well in his article. It was winners and losers from this past year's draft. I just don't think that this team clicked all that well. Clearly, I mean, the NFL is, I don't want to say they're elite at evaluating talent, but at the end of the day, it's their job to make individual assessments on how well these players are going to perform at the next level. So when you take 13 guys and what Georgia fans consider to be a down year, like maybe it wasn't so much on the individuals, but the team just was missing something all around.
And then the part of that missing is the offensive lineman. You talk about Tate Ratledge taken in the second round, Dylan Fairchild taken in the third round, as well as the other Jared Wilson taken in the third round as well. So you had that offensive line, but all of those guys were banged up throughout the year. And so I think that's a big part of it, at least on the offensive line, that, you know, you just couldn't gel. I do think another winner, you talk about individuals, Ty Ingram Dawkins, it was a question if he would come out, and he decided he was done. He gets taken the first pick of the 5th round as well. But can I tell you what really stuck out to me? And you talk about talent-wise, one thing that keeps sticking with me from the NFL draft. Can I tell you?
Sure.
All right, so it's actually a couple of guys that did not get drafted.
Okay.
So when you look at it, for me, I was a little bit surprised that Xavier Truss and Nazir Stackhouse didn't get drafted. This is the reason, because those guys were 3-year starters for the University of Georgia. Both of these guys were good enough to start on the 2022 National Championship team that was perfect. They started in 23, they started in 24, but they weren't drafted. Mm-hmm. So that, to me, is kind of, I don't know if it's a red flag, but like, what's going on there? Because you got two guys at two very important positions, offensive tackle, and granted, Truss started some at guard as well, but defensive tackle and Naz Stackhouse, you're a 3-year starter but didn't get drafted. And it's not because, you know, Jeff Sentell put out a great stat where guys who sign with Georgia and stay all 4 years, 75% of them get drafted. So these two guys are in that minority. Mm-hmm. And usually the guys I think that would fall in that category, like a Chaz Chambliss, who had to wait his turn a long time. He doesn't have the great size. But Xavier Truss and Naz Stackhouse are two guys with pretty good size, right? Like, they look like NFL players. So it does worry me a little bit that you had, nobody who could take their job if they're not NFL worthy.
Yeah.
Or that they just didn't develop into NFL talent. And so you look back at these last couple of years, maybe is that somewhere where Georgia should have upgraded at some point, and was that a weak link on this team? If you had 13 draft picks, you had a couple guys there at very important positions which just never progressed like you want them to. And Kirby Smart talked about it when Naz Stackhouse came back for last year. He said, I don't want him to just come back, I want him to progress. And I'm not sure if that ever happened, and maybe that is one of the reasons this team, again, underachieved winning an SEC.
As I'm watching the 7th round, and I'm not kidding, the moment that we got back from the cruise, I sat on my couch, I watched every single pick of the draft. That has never happened before. And I think the one name that I was waiting to hear be called at the end was Naz Stackhouse, because I figured in my head, okay, somebody's going to take a chance on a Georgia defender just because it's a Kirby Smart coach defense. Xavier Truss, maybe not so much, super inconsistent over the course of the last year, but we talked about the offensive line a little bit and how much they struggled this year. But again, Ratledge, Wilson, Fairchild were taken within the first 3 rounds, yet it was a major concern, especially considering the fact that when you look at last year's mock drafts, Ernest Green was considered to be a potential first-rounder. I think what we learned from this is not only were these guys a lot more talented than we gave them credit for, but you brought up injuries. That was a big thing, is that this group didn't really get to mesh until the end because at one point or another, somebody on the starting line was hurt. But I also take this back to a tough schedule. Between injuries and playing such a long, tough schedule, especially if you're going to get into the playoffs, it's only going to become increasingly more difficult for the offensive linemen. So now you have to stack more depth at that position if you're Georgia now more than ever. We'll talk about some of the transfers that they brought in later, but we see now that when it comes to the lines of scrimmage, you can have all the talent in the world on that line, but if you don't have the depth that you need to be able to overcome injuries and a tough schedule, it's not going to get you anywhere.
And that's only going to get tougher and tougher in an NIL world where guys are wanting to get paid, so you can't spend money the way you would have stacked up another 5-star behind a 5-star like Georgia did for such a long time. Now you really are going to have to coach up some guys who maybe are going to get playing time that shouldn't. And that is something you see in the NFL, is because the rosters are so limited. Sometimes you just got to go pick up a guy off the street and he's going to start in the NFL. Well, it's going to be a similar type thing at Georgia. So that's what worries me about the development of those two guys we talked about, because we need to be developing. You got to get a guy who's just a 3-star and just really wants to come to Georgia that you're not having to pay a premium for, and he needs to be ready because, again, if you're adding another SEC game, which is a lot of talk with the schedule, it's only going to get tougher and harder. So you're going to have to be able to coach up guys who wouldn't be necessarily ready to play that are going to have to play for you.
And, too, after talking with Jeff yesterday about the quality of offensive linemen and defensive linemen and how much they're getting paid now coming right out of high school, like, that's such a big chunk of your budget. So you really have to figure out how you're going to spread that money around to make sure that you've got enough people at that position to help you be successful moving forward. Last thing, it wouldn't be a draft if the Eagles didn't take a Georgia player. I was actually pretty surprised about how things went down with Smile Mondon. Like, I wasn't necessarily sure he was going to be a day 2 guy because it's so hard to know with the injuries that he dealt with. But then, of course, the Eagles swoop in and take him, which in that moment when I saw that the Eagles had the next pick, I just had a feeling that that's where they were going to go. However, this is not about the Eagles. This is about the Lions taking a page out of the Eagles' book. Of course, they take Tate Ratledge at the end there. They take Dan Jackson, who, by the way, went 1 pick before Quinn Ewers. I mean, if you would have told us that at the beginning of this past year, we would have told you that something crazy had happened. And then they also take Dom Lovett. I feel like this is going to be a trend moving forward. I think the Lions are just the next to do it, but I feel like now knowing how hard practice is, how knowing all of these guys can play special teams, I think the Lions are just the first in what's about to be a domino effect of the next couple drafts where we just see teams get to the end and it's like, okay, you fulfilled all your needs. Well, let me just take somebody who I know can actually contribute.
Yeah, and I think it's a copycat league. We see that all the time. You know, Sean McVay gets hired as a young, offensive-minded head coach, and then we see like 8 of them get hired around the NFL. So now the Eagles have success drafting all of these Georgia players, particularly on defense, and other teams are going to say, let's just do what they do. Like, it's not that smart. And we've said that over and over. Like, Howie Roseman is not some genius, the GM for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's just a smart. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out if these guys are on the best defense ever to play in college. Well, let's draft some of them. And it was happy to see the folks in Flowery Branch got on board that train as well, finally this year. But, yeah, it doesn't take somebody, it's not brain surgery to figure out those guys are really good in college. Maybe they'll be really good in the NFL. And like we said earlier, if you're going to err on the side of, I'm going to get somebody who's played and starred in the SEC.
And I think that next year's draft will tell us a lot because at this point in time, there's no guarantee that any Georgia player is going to go in the first round. I think that Georgia might end up having 2, but there is a good possibility that they don't have any, but I don't think that's going to take away from how many guys Georgia will have drafted next year because of this position that Kirby Smart has put them in and seeing what the Eagles and Lions have now done with their rosters.
Yeah, and when you talk about, there's going to be a lot of guys who will get drafted next year. The first rounders, I think it is kind of hard to look at right now is Dalen Everett, if he continues on the path that he has taken, especially second half of last season. Could he work himself into a first-round cornerback? Maybe that's the case. You look at a guy like Lawson Lucky or Oscar Delp. Could they be a late first-rounder if one of them has a really good year? Some of these wide receivers, Noah Thomas or Zagoria Branch, I've even seen projected as a first-rounder. He could be one of those guys. Colby Young. it's going to be hard for those guys to rack up the stats they probably need to become first-rounders. But then we talked about, the 2024 way too early one had Ernest Green. And then Monroe Freeling's just the size-wise, they're going to get their chance. They could work their way in there, but they've got to stay healthy, first of all, and then put together a good year. But the thing about Georgia, too, that I don't think gets looked at enough, this team is playing on prime time every Saturday night. The nation is watching this Georgia team every Saturday night. So Jalen Walker, he was not considered a first-rounder a year ago. But you know what? He starts making plays, and you get guys from the NFL. Micah Parsons is tweeting about this guy because he's on prime time and literally the world is watching. Well, then you're going to be able to move up to a first-round status.
So when we get to dog bites here in literally just a second, I've got somebody that I think could eventually work themselves up to be in a first-round position, kind of based off the things that you were saying. But that's one thing I do love about the NFL draft is, like, it's not just about watching what teams are going to take what players, but it really does tell a story, not just about the teams in the NFL, but about at the collegiate level as well. The storylines, the drama that it brings, like, it really is like the best movie trilogy ever.
And you don't know what happens, right?
Yes.
There are so many people, hundreds are doing these mock drafts, right? Thousands of mock drafts. And none of them are ever right. And it's almost like the NCAA tournament. Like, nobody can actually predict this. And that's what makes it so fascinating, is that everybody thinks they know. Everybody's an expert until the chips get out on the table, and then everybody's like, oh, yeah, maybe we should have seen that.
And we're going to make fun of some people later on the show who thought that they really knew what was going to happen. But first, we want to remind you that here on DawgNation at Large, we are so excited to partner with Zagoria Law Firm. And what we love about Zagoria Law Firm is that they are the only law firm in the state that specializes in representing people who have been bitten by dogs, as well as those who have been knocked down by dogs. That's right, dog fans. They're the official dog bite injury lawyers of the Georgia Bulldogs. So if you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's dog, give them a call at 833-GA-DOG-BITE. That's DOGBITE, or visit ZagoriaLaw.com. Now, let's do some dog bites. So, spring portal is finally over. I remember Connor and I having the conversation that, okay, maybe the spring portal isn't going to be as active and busy for the dogs because we built it up to be like this big thing, but the dogs were more active in this year's portal. 4 new players. We'll discuss the running back later. You bring in an outside linebacker, which clearly after G-Day we saw Quintavious Johnson go down. We knew that they needed to bring in somebody else, but kind of what we were discussing earlier about, like, the strength of the schedule and how long it is, how you need depth at both lines of scrimmage. I thought that Georgia addressed that. Obviously, they go get Joshua Horton from Miami for the defensive line, and then Walt Claire Flynn from Central Florida on the offensive line. So I think it just backs up what you and I were talking about earlier, that maybe the portal is a good way to bring in those guys who can help you in the backup positions.
Yeah, not going to be any starters per se in this spring portal, but I do think, yeah, you got to get guys at depth. Now, starting positions could be there at the edge, depending on which guys step up. You talk about injuries to Quintavious Johnson, but I think that this is more about just kind of building the depth, because we do see the defensive line is a position. They're just rolling guys in. You got to have bodies, and you're playing a schedule like this. You're playing, a long season. You're going to need everybody to contribute. I'm excited to see kind of how the second-year guys, the guys who transfer this, because we haven't seen a transfer come in and really make a huge difference. Trevor Etienne may be the exception there, but the guys haven't made a huge difference in their first year. So these guys, it may take a little while to marinate, but we'll see. I'd love to see some of the transfers from last year kind of make this a next step.
So I told you we would revisit this conversation again because I'm looking at mock drafts for next year. Maybe saw it once, but I think that C.J. Allen is someone that could be in a really good position to rise up in the ranks, maybe coming into a similar situation as Jalen Walker last year, but with more playing experience with him and Raylan Wilson. Maybe he didn't have the season that we all thought he was going to this year, but I think that he knows what he needs to do. He's also now a leader in this room, so I really think that C.J. Allen is someone who can work himself to being a future first-rounder.
Yeah, I saw the mock draft had him, 17 to the Broncos was one of the mini mock drafts out there. The only thing that worries me, that Jalen Walker, the difference was he could come off the edge as well. And I think the middle linebacker is sometimes not as high a priority in the NFL as we have seen in years past. But the thing with CJ is he's seen it all at this point, right? Like, he knows the defense like the back of his hand. He's out there wearing the green dot, directing traffic, making the calls. So that's the one thing you got to love about C.J. Allen, and he's had that experience. The other thing we talked about earlier in the show, he's going to get a chance to show his stuff. The only other thing that worries, too, is like Raylan Wilson's going to be out there. Chris Cole's going to force himself onto the field this year. Justin Williams is going to force himself on the field this year. So it'll be interesting to see how all of those guys use all of that time. Is Chris Cole more of a Jalen Walker coming off the edge just to make room for for C.J. Allen? But I would love to see C.J. be a first-round pick. I think he can definitely take a next step, because I do think last year, he'll probably admit this, not the year he had wanted, or kind of the year we expected to take, as he was in his first or second full year as a starter.
I think one thing to keep in mind, too, in some of the video that we just showed, you can actually see that green dot in the back of C.J. Allen's helmet, which means he's the one player on the defense that the coaches should speak to. That tells you everything you should know about how much trust Georgia has in him as the quarterback of their defense. So I wouldn't count C.J. Allen out just yet.
All right.
I don't want to say it. I don't want to be the one to say it. I wasn't exactly sure how Georgia was going to address the portal. I thought that they kind of had a lot of running backs, but they make an absolute statement by bringing in Joshua McCray for Illinois. Stats for last year, Illinois, 117 carries for 609 yards and 10 touchdowns. But what really stood out to me is that he also had 13 receptions for 116 yards and another touchdown. Like, that proved to be a really big strength for Trevor Etienne last year, was that he was also a really good pass catcher. So I feel like the Dogs were really trying to make a statement, make sure that the run game is not an issue at all this year, and have lots of depth, because that has been a position where they've struggled with injuries so much, not just last year, but the year before too. So I feel like Kirby Smart's trying to come in, make a statement, and is trying to put the Dogs in a position to where they are one of the top 3 rushing offenses in the SEC.
Yeah, one of the good news is you talk about Trevor Etienne. We know a running back can come in and be an impact player immediately out of the portal. And like you also said, we get Branson Robinson transfers out, and we kind of wish him well. He goes to Georgia State with Del McGee, a guy he knows really well. So hoping the best for Branson as he can stay healthy. If he can stay healthy, that would be great. But you can never have enough Georgia running backs. I think back to some of the guys who probably left in the portal a few years ago, and when they saw what happened this past year, they realized they probably could have been on the field when we were having to lean really strongly on Nate Frazier. So, yeah, bringing in one more guy at running back is never a bad thing. Georgia does not like to have a bell cow if they can help it. So Nate Frazier will probably be your starter, but I think they would like to have a guy, have guys come in there to spell him. And I would also, you bring in the transfer. Is it push a guy like Chauncey Bowens? Let's get him out there, see what he can do in his second year.
But also just having extra help in the run game provides more tools for Gunnar Stockton. They're going to want to give him some help this year. So by bringing in another running back, you also give Gunnar Stockton more options and more security. This week, we have talked so much about Jared Curtis, who, by the way, will make his decision Monday, May 5th. It's going to be 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central. Myself and Jeff Sentell will be on the call, as well as Brandon Adams, so you can tune into whatever DawgNation platform you watch on to see the decision live. We've talked about it so much, but I don't feel like we've gotten to hear your opinion, and I know you've gotten to hear everybody's from myself and Jeff, as well as Brandon. Do you have any inkling on where this might go?
No, and it's so interesting. Like, we've heard about Jared Curtis for years now because he's been around and Jeff's been telling us about it. And, Jeff's whole thing when this all started was, his mom just wears Georgia earrings around to make him convince him that he wants to come to Georgia. So mom's still on board, which is always a good thing for Georgia. But the other thing I thought was really interesting to hear from Jeff when you guys had Before the Hedges coming up last night was that it's kind of uncharted territory. Georgia hasn't done this. For a while they had 5-star quarterbacks kind of stocked in there, but Georgia has never been a quarterback-centric team. And even those years that we think Georgia's going to be, like last year we thought Georgia was going to have a Heisman winner at quarterback, and it was kind of a disappointing year. The last time before that we thought Georgia had a Heisman winner. I think back to Matthew Stafford, and it never really panned out. So Georgia's never really been successful. The best years, Stetson was very good, but he was never, and Heisman finalist. He got invited to New York, right? But going into the season, it wasn't centered around the quarterback. So to be in these sweepstakes, it's kind of unfamiliar territory to be in these like high dollar sweepstakes for a quarterback. So it is kind of a strange feeling. You know, Georgia did win the Justin Fields recruitment and Jacob Eason, and those were big. And maybe there was money there that we never saw, but you just never felt this way. Like, are we the guys who pay big money for quarterbacks? That feels like, the Southern Cals and, the Oklahoma and Texases of the world. It doesn't feel like us. So it'll be interesting if Jared Curtis does commit to Georgia. Now you're in that game, and then it puts a big clock, right? Like, you're paying a lot of money for that young man to sit on the bench. So that kind of puts a lot of pressure on everybody to, you see struggles from, the quarterback next year, whether that's Gunnar or Ryan Puglisi or whoever. They're going to be pushing, hey, we got this very expensive freshman to put in there. So it's a whole different world than I feel like Georgia fans have been in for a while.
So let me just tell y'all what I've heard, because I have been able to piece together some information since we last talked about it. He initially was supposed to release a video, and then he decides, hey, I'm going to do like an actual live commitment ceremony. Well, the video is already finished. The video has already been made, and neither school knows. He doesn't want either of the schools to know until that decision happens. And neither of the schools are allowed to have contact with him. It all has to be done through his agent. But at this point in time, it has been very hush-hush. He doesn't want anybody to know what's happening. But the decision has already been made. So it's not like he's pitting them against each other right now. He knows what he wants to do, but nobody knows what's going to happen.
The other part of that is like only contact through his agent. It just kind of turns my stomach a little bit. I guess
right?
That is the world we are living in now. And the only other thing is, like, I don't want it to be a diva moment, right? Like, again, this is why we love Gunnar Stockton, because he's just like blue collar. And so if you have somebody like this, is this going to be too much of a diva moment? I hope that's not the case.
I feel like if he does commit to Georgia, Georgia fans are going to be willing to forgive the journey that it's been. But if he doesn't, then I don't know how nice everyone's going to be about. Oh, for sure. Okay, last thing. We didn't really get the chance to talk much about this. We got to talk about the Nico drama a little bit, but now Tennessee's put in a very vulnerable position with their quarterbacks. You have Jake Merklinger, who's actually a native of Georgia. He's a redshirt freshman, and then, of course, the drama just continues. They bring in Joey Aguilar, the quarterback from UCLA, and basically just one big switch. But if you're a Georgia fan, you have to feel so much better about that first SEC road game at Tennessee. Now, Kirby Smart's going to tell you that there are no easy road games in the SEC, and that's true. But if you're a Georgia fan, you'd much rather be facing a Tennessee team that whoever their quarterback is, it's going to be their first played SEC game ever. And, I mean, I'm not going to lie, when that schedule was released and I saw that Tennessee's, oh my gosh, week 3 after 2 cupcake teams, and it's on the road at Tennessee, like, it doesn't matter if this Georgia team goes on to win a national championship. That first game is going to be the hardest one on your schedule. So it's got to make you feel a little bit more comfortable going into Neyland now, knowing that their quarterback is not going to have that much time to mesh with the program.
Yeah, and Kirby Smart knows how to mess with young quarterbacks as well. So you can expect they're going to be seeing some ghosts out there, and Kirby will have things ready. We'll get to see how good of a coach Josh Heupel really is here, and if this offense that he's been doing for years and years is all it's hyped up to be. So, yes, that trip up to Neyland and Rocky Top, maybe they won't even be playing the song very much like it was the last time Georgia went up there. So you must feel much, much better about Gunnar Stockton's first road SEC start as well.
All right, so with that, in just a moment, we are going to look at a bunch of memes from this past week. My gosh, I felt like I had to hold back and make sure I didn't do all the rated R ones because they were too good. But first, as we mentioned off the top, we were on the DawgNation cruise this past week. It was one of the best trips I've ever been on, getting to see Cody in action as well as the rest of our coworkers, and just getting to be with a community of people who love Georgia football and want to spend the week talking about it. It truly is such a special thing, and for the first time ever, DawgNation already knows what days, what location, and what ship the 2026 DawgNation cruise is going to be on. You've heard us talk about it all week long, but we always want more people to join. The retention rate is so high, but we're looking to get more people on the boat. So if you had FOMO last week from not being on the ship with us, you can contact Jay Slater at dreamvacations.com. Again, that's Jay Slater at dreamvacations.com to figure out how you can be on the DawgNation cruise for 2026. It's going to take place April 20th through the 24th, and we're going to be back on Utopia of the Seas, which I'm telling you is a major decision because that boat is so humongous that sometimes it's hard to remember that you're even on a ship because it's like a small city on water. So you have to remind yourself, like, oh my gosh, we're out in the middle of the ocean. But we want to see as many new faces there as possible. So contact Jay Slater at dreamvacations.com. Usually we do some sort of fun segment, but all the fun I had this past weekend was just looking at the draft, looking on my phone to see what everybody's saying about it. So this week we are just going to do an extension of Meme Machine.
Who's that coming down the track? Who's that coming down the track? It's a Meme Machine around the block. It's a Meme Machine around the block. Go,
That's what it sounded like on Utopia of the Seas this past week.
I feel like I got to make myself real comfortable for this one because with some of these has to come discussion, you know, about the situation itself. I do believe I have myself kicking off this week.
All right, what you got?
I don't need this. Let's pull up the first one. I'm not sure. We had to submit 3 apiece. Okay, so this is from Succession. Kieran Culkin is obviously perfect. It says, Jax Ulbrich at family dinner when dad got the news. Okay, first off, the Falcons have a great draft. I mean, they make big power moves. You got the fan base that's actually satisfied about your picks for once. And then, of course, it ends in Falcons scandal.
Ugh, and it's just so... It's unfortunate, right? Like, it's not anybody in Flowery Branch's fault. Maybe, you know, it is Jeff Ulbrich's fault for leaving the iPad out, but as a 21-year-old, like, he can figure out, he should be taking responsibility and not doing that kind of stuff. But, yeah, it just feels so Falcons. But I think what's so great is, like, it did make me wonder, like, $100,000 that dad just got fined because of something you did. Like, I've done stuff to screw stuff up for my dad, but never at that kind of level. And so I'm like, what is he doing at that point to pay that back? Because you know dad's not, like, is he out mowing the grass? Like, it's hard for me to imagine what kind of punishment happens to a kid who cost his parents $100,000?
I don't know. I know for sure that my dad's given me the silent treatment for like 2 weeks straight at minimum. And like the prank calls were obviously such a big problem. Now Shadur's is the one that got displayed the most. And like I think that's just wrong to begin with in general, but it happened to so many players. The only way you eliminate that is by letting all the prospects find out in real time on television that, hey, we're taking you, you know, no heads up. That's the only way the problem gets prevented in the future. But also, too, I put a lot of this on whoever posted the video of the prank call. Like, the key of a really good prank call is for nobody to ever find out that it was you. And it took maybe a couple of hours for that video to start getting all over the internet. And it's like, you are such a liability by putting your face in the background of that video. You don't think that people are going to find out who you are,
it's
like with all the contact clues?
It's the clout, Kaylee.
Yeah, but, I mean, obviously you didn't take into account how much was at stake.
No, and I don't, with most pranks, right? Like any prank, it's your seniors are graduating high school. Now they're going to go do some stupid thing and not think about the consequences, right? It just happens. Now a 21-year-old is different from a 17 or an 18-year-old as well, should have more maturity. But I do think the prank calls, you talked about it, I don't know, do you send them a separate phone just to have, and that's your hotline phone? Because, yeah, it happened more than just Shadur Sanders. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we don't know who did the other ones, but you definitely heard some other players getting prank called. And, yeah, it's gut-wrenching because these guys, that is their future. And, you know, they're finding out in this phone call, and for somebody to take that away is pretty cruel.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on. What you got for your first one?
This one is, yes, draft Shadur or draw 25. Apparently everybody in the NFL would rather draw 25. Now, the fact, if you don't think Shadur was a first-round pick, that's fine. But, we're all kidding ourselves if you think can he be worse than some of the other guys that got drafted before him? And, like, the Cleveland Browns drafted Dylan Gabriel and then go back and draft him, which tells you what they think of Dylan Gabriel. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't think we've solved that problem. We still need to draft Shadur again. So I think it totally speaks to me, every week, Deion Sanders is going to have a press conference for his team as Colorado. You don't think Deion Sanders is going to comment on what's going on at whatever team Shadur is playing at? And he can't stop himself on Twitter or Instagram. He is constantly updating that. So, yeah, it does come with the package that you're going to get this parent who is going on a huge platform call out your team week after week. So I think that was part of the reason everybody was pumping the brakes.
The situation was so messy. And I feel like maybe that's why I watched it as long as I did, because at that point I'm like, I just want to see where he goes. And after it wasn't day one, I was like, okay, well, at least it's going to be the second round. And then it's at the Saints that took Tyler Shuck. And I was like, oh, this is about to get bad. Like, if you view that this kid is better than Shedeur, so clearly this isn't just from a talent standpoint. And, like, once you get past that second round and Jalen Milroe also goes off the board, it's like you have to weigh, okay, well, my starting quarterback, okay, if they bring drama, whatever. But, like, you don't want your backup quarterback to have more drama and recognition surrounding them than your starting quarterback. And it's just, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's a little bit ironic that it's the Cleveland Browns, because that is where quarterback careers go to die.
Oh, you think about it, I mean, the Cleveland Browns, like, you'll see the fans wearing the shirts with all the names of all the quarterbacks who've started, like, in the last 10 years. But, yeah, the backup quarterback is always on every team going to be the most popular player. We're going to see that this year at Georgia. It was Gunnar Stockton, right? But now it's going to be Ryan Puglisi as every Georgia fan, because that's just the way backup quarterbacks go. And he's going to go to a team, he was going to go to a team that doesn't have an established starting quarterback. So this guy's going to mess up whoever is starting, and then everybody's going to be calling. And again, yeah, it's just going to be, and you're going to get that from dad as well. You don't want people calling out your quarterback, then that starter's, not feeling great. So it is a messy situation.
Speaking of dads, I think that this next one actually comes from my dad. I don't ever really want to give him that much credit, but he does have funny Twitter fingers. I saw that he tweeted this out. It said, I needed Mel Kiper on my side when I came home with a rough report card in the 7th grade. The Mel Kiper meltdown will go down in history. And I felt so bad for every person that was picked after Shedeur, because it's like they might as well not have been drafted those next 10 picks, because it was only about that. It was like the secondhand embarrassment I had for Mel Kiper was absolutely through the roof. But in that moment, I'm like, I hope that Shedeur Sanders sent him a long thank you message about defending him. And also, too, I brought home a bad report card before, and I remember how my dad acted. So when he tweeted that, I was like, you know what, ironically, I understand that, because I needed Mel Kiper on my side when I brought home my calculus grade sophomore year.
Did your dad ever have to go to bat for you, like with a softball coach, the same kind of thing?
No.
Kaylee should be playing. It's not about talent.
It was never like that at all. My dad was always friends with the coaches, and like I don't know, I think he knew better than that, because he himself at one point was a coach. He was never my coach, but he coached my little sister. So I think that he knew what it was like to have parents come from different angles at you.
Very interesting.
So anyway.
All right, here's my number 2 meme for this week, and it would be a meme of, yes, the other drama going on around the world. It says the UNC sideline this fall. Yeah, Jordan Hudson alongside boyfriend Bill Belichick. And what's crazy to me about the whole situation, this is talking about how she helped kill Hard Knocks, the CBS interview, where she stopped it right in the middle. And that one stuck out to me this week, because Bill Belichick was so famous for running his own press conference the way he wanted to run it. Like, he famously just kept answering in one, we're moving on to Cincinnati, we're moving on to Cincinnati. The man can hold his own press conference, except when he got into the CBS interview, then his 24-year-old girlfriend needed to step in and say, no, we're not answering that question. It's this guy who seemed so untouchable for so long, and it just seems not that way, so weak, because he's having to have somebody step in and talk for him in an interview. It seemed very, very strange.
All I've thought about this whole week, as more and more stuff comes out about this, like, that woman behind the scenes is so mad right now. Like, I'm scared for what the conversations and the arguments that Bill Belichick and his girlfriend have had just over the last couple of days, because all this negative publicity has been brought onto him, and even more so her. So it's like, I know that she's sulking in a corner or yelling at him, like, as we are having this conversation right now, because all of this has made her look horrible. I feel like it kind of almost in our eyes makes us a little bit more sympathetic for Bill Belichick, because we saw the way that she just... So, yeah. I don't know.
And he was like the big, scary bad guy for so long. and now he just looks neutered because he has somebody doing all his talking for him.
Oh my God, I'm scared for him. A sentence I never thought would come out of my mouth about Bill Belichick. Okay, so I think that we've got one more, right? Yeah. Okay. I'm sure you saw a lot of this week on Twitter. And it says, and I want to say y'all bullied the entire Falcons organization for this. And you know what? Yes, we did. We found out this week, you can shake your head all you want. Cyberbullying works because I think the Falcons all along were going to take James Pierce. But once Jalen Walker's on the board, okay, you obviously can't give that up. Not just because he's a great player, but also too, I think the Falcons really realize, okay, we need the support of the Georgia fan base. So yes, cyberbullying does work.
My only thing is, if it would have worked, it would have worked years ago. Georgia fans have beginning the Jalen Carter pick, all these other people that they've passed on throughout the year, Nakobe Dean, all these people they've passed on through the years. If it would have worked, maybe Dog fans have been yelling at the Falcons for a long, long time. So finally, it does pay off. Maybe it just takes a long time with cyberbullying. But yeah, what a bad look if they would have passed on Jalen Walker.
Oh, God.
And I think the one thing I said it earlier this week.
Bill Belichick's girlfriend.
I love Jalen Walker in the Falcons locker room because they lost a guy like Grady Jarrett who was the guy you go talk to, and he is the voice of the team. I think Jalen Walker, it will not take very long, even as a rookie, to become the voice of this team.
All right, show me your last one on the board here.
All right, here we go. Last one for me this week, and it's a sound bite. So we're actually going to play it. It came from the Philadelphia Eagles.
Smile.
How you doing?
It's Howie Rosen from the Eagles.
Oh, hey, what's up, man?
What do you think? Would it be a draft without the Philadelphia Eagles taking a Georgia defensive player?
Hell no, I wouldn't.
Hell no. You've been sitting for too long, brother. We're picking you right here.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Congratulations.
I just love the hell no, I wouldn't, right? Smile was so ready for it to happen. And you talked about, I felt like Smile slipped to the Eagles, and this is going to be another steal for the Philadelphia Eagles because I do think he is going to have a very good career. And so he came out as, a 5-star linebacker prospect, did his thing at Georgia. He's just injured. So if he stays healthy, I just feel like that's going to be, the Eagles are going to be like, we got him where in the draft? Yeah, I think he was very undervalued.
From getting the chance to talk to Smile over the course of the last couple of months, he is he's funny, but he's also very collected. But I feel like what we didn't hear was after that phone call, finding out that he's going to the Eagles and going to play with his boys. That's the reaction I wish we really could have seen. Hey, Mom, going to the Eagles,
Yeah, it's so happy for him and his family. But he is one of those guys who was so quiet, so to hear him be like, hell no, it's not, it's really funny. So loved seeing that for Smile. Loved seeing for all the Georgia guys because we have, over the years, gotten to know every one of them. And so to see them all have those draft dreams come true is really cool.
All right, so that's going to wrap up today's show here on DawgNation at Large. I want to say thank you so much to Cody Chaffins for joining me this week. Connor, we hope you enjoy your vacation, and this is the moment we're going to find out if you're actually watching or not. But DawgNation, we appreciate you. Don't forget to sign up for the 2026 DawgNation Cruise. We'll see you right back here next Thursday at 7 o'clock.